Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving deep into a really profound and, honestly, a pretty challenging argument about the human condition. It comes straight out of the book of Romans. And while it starts with a pretty grim diagnosis, stick with me, because it ultimately points to an unbelievable hope. All right, let's get into it.
So let's start with a modern paradox, something you've probably felt or seen. We're told constantly that true freedom means being the sole author of your life, completely free from any creator. But the more we chase that absolute autonomy, the more you hear people talk about this crushing pressure, this deep, profound emptiness. Well, this ancient text argues that this isn't some accident. It's actually the predictable outcome of one fundamental mistake. At the very heart of this entire argument is this one crucial idea: a cosmic trade. The Greek word for it is metalaxon, and it just means to exchange one thing for another, to swap. The text claims the root of all our problems isn't some big, long list of bad things we do. Nope. It's one foundational exchange. We traded the infinite, glorious creator for the temporary, finite things he created. So this single act, swapping God's truth for a lie, becomes the theological starting point for literally everything that follows. Think of it like this: it's knocking over the very first domino in a massive chain reaction that just unravels human existence from the inside out. And this slide just lays it all out, right? The contrast is so stark. On one side, you've got the creator, eternal, the actual source of all glory, the only thing that's really worthy of our worship. And on the other side, creation. It's temporary. It's just a reflection of that glory. It's the stuff we were meant to use and enjoy. The great exchange is what happens when we flip that order, when we start to worship the things that were only ever meant to be used. Okay, so what happens when we make this trade? What are the consequences? Well, the text describes it as a giving over. Now, that's a judicial term. It suggests that God doesn't actively, push humanity into darkness. It's more like he allows us, as a form of judgment, to walk the very path we've already chosen. And this unraveling happens in three distinct stages. The first stage of this collapse starts on the inside. Before it ever shows up in our relationships or in our society, the very first casualty is our own internal world of desire. And here's that key phrase again: God gave them over. In the original Greek, it's paradokon. Because humanity exchanged the creator for creation, God essentially steps back and allows the desires of the heart to just run wild. And the result, the text says, is this fundamental impurity that leads to the dishonoring of our own bodies. And this is where it gets really relatable for us today, right? When we dethrone a creator, what fills that vacuum? The self. Our feelings become our ultimate truth. Our possessions, they become our security. Our reputation becomes our glory. I mean, this just brilliantly shows how this ancient diagnosis of idol worship is really just a life centered on self-worship. Now, this internal collapse, it doesn't stay internal for long. Of course not. That brokenness inevitably spills outward. And that leads us to the second stage, the destruction of our human relationships. The text brings up a really critical contrast here between what it calls natural use and what is against nature. Now, the Greek word for nature, physis, it's not just about biology. In the philosophical world back then, it meant the inherent order of things, the way the world was designed to function. The argument here is that after that great exchange, this intended created order is abandoned and completely reversed. And check out the consequence for this reversal. It's fascinating. The text says the penalty is received in themselves. What does that mean? It means the judgment isn't some external punishment like a lightning bolt from the sky. No, the act itself becomes its own consequence. The breakdown of that created order leads to an internal breakdown of relational peace and this deep experience of shame. And that brings us to the third and final stage of the collapse. And honestly, it's arguably the most devastating. After our desires and our relationships, the very faculty of human reason, our ability to think clearly and make good judgments, it becomes corrupted. Now here, you've got to see this powerful wordplay in the original Greek. It is incredible. Because humanity judged God as unworthy, they did not think it worthwhile, which is uk edokimasan. God, in turn, gave them over to a worthless mind. Adokimon, noun. See the connection? It's this perfect, chilling reversal. By judging God as unworthy of our thought, our own ability to think becomes worthless. And this is the terrifying climax of the whole diagnosis. The mind literally loses its ability to tell right from wrong. And this, of course, leads to a total explosion of social breakdown. But the final, most chilling step is this. knowing full well that these actions are destructive. People don't just do them. They give hearty approval. The Greek word is synedoukasin, which means they celebrate it. They applaud others who do the same. Sin moves from being just a personal act to becoming a celebrated culture.
Wow, okay. After that incredibly grim diagnosis, you would think that's the end of the story, right? But this is precisely where the entire argument pivots to reveal why we need a rescue that is just as radical as the collapse itself. So we have to ask the question, right? Is humanity just left in this state? Left given over to broken desires, relational chaos, and a worthless mind? I mean, is that the final word? And here comes the most stunning reversal of all. That very same word, the one used 3 times to describe our judgment, paradoken, given over, well, it's the exact same word the author uses later to describe our salvation. A single word holds both the sentence and the salvation. This right here is the heart of the message. Yes, humanity was given over to the consequences of their cosmic trade. That was an act of judgment. But in an act of unbelievable love, God the Father gave over his own Son, Jesus Christ, to death on the cross for our salvation. The same action, the same word, paradoken, holds both the problem and the solution. And that right there is the ultimate point. The cross is the one place in the entire universe where God's just act of giving over humanity to its chosen path is met and overcome by his loving act of giving over his Son to rescue us from that very path.
So what does this all mean for us then? This whole cosmic drama, it isn't just some abstract theological idea. It's actually an invitation to a completely recreated way of life.
But first, it's so important to understand this. The purpose of this intense diagnosis is not to give us a weapon to judge other people. It's meant to be a mirror. In fact, right after this section, the author says, "Therefore you have no excuse, O man, every one of you who judges." The whole point is to see this collapse as our own story. The invitation, then, is to reverse the reversal. First, to make a new exchange. To dethrone that idol of self and put the Creator back on the throne where he belongs. Second, to rediscover the joy of living within the created order, following the path of holiness that Christ makes possible. And finally, to use our renewed minds to build communities that celebrate God's truth, instead of giving approval to the world's lies. So we end right back where we begin. The entire diagnosis and the remedy, it all hinges on one single question. The original cosmic trade was a question of worship. The solution in Christ is a restoration of worship. And so the invitation to us, to you, is to answer this for yourself. What or who truly sits on the throne at the center of your life?